So all the participants who are having any questions can type in the chat box, which we'll take up after the presentation from Dhruv Nath sir today. Sahil, I think you can initiate.
Okay. So,
Yes, Sahil, yes, sir. You can start, Sahil.
okay. So before we begin the session today, we have a few housekeeping rules that once the speaker is presenting, you have any kind of questions, you can drop those questions in the chat bot box, and we also have some options here wherein you can share in your responses when Dhruv sir is presenting, that whether if you want him to go a little faster, or you want him to go a little slow down a little, and also given your responses like whether the session was knowledgeable or not. So good afternoon everyone. Amity Innovation Incubator welcomes you all in today's insightful webinar, and we have the opportunity to interact with one of the well-known industry and innovation expert, Dr. Dhruv Nath. Before moving further, let me give you a quick brief about Amity Innovation Incubator. Amity Innovation Incubator, popularly known as AII, has been operating and supporting startups in various sectors for more than a decade now. We are sector agnostics, and we continue to handhold startups at different levels, right away from pre-incubation, commercialization to acceleration, and further investment support. Till now, AII has helped and supported more than 350 plus startups, and invested in more than 60 startups from Amity Capital Ventures, our investment vehicle. AII has been supported by Department of Science and Technology (DST), Government of India, Niti Aayog, and under Niti Aayog under its Atal Innovation Mission, and Ministry of Electronic and Information Technology under its MSH initiative. AII has more than 17 virtual and physical centers in India and 7 centers abroad, and we continue to work very closely with government and private organizations across the globe to help and handle startups in various key areas. According to a recent study, over 94% of new businesses failed during first year of operation. Lack of funding turns out to be one of the common reasons. Money is the bloodline of any business. The long, painstaking yet exciting journey from the idea to revenue generating business needs a fuel named capital. That's why at almost every stage of business, entrepreneurs find themselves asking, how do I finance my startup? To to throw light on this issue, we have with us renowned speaker, Professor Dr. Dhruv Nath, with us today. Dr. Dhruv Nath is a professor at MDI Gurugram. He's also an angel investor and and a director with Lead Angels Network. In the process, Dr. Nath has mentored over 50 digital business startups such as Planet Spark, Trivon, My Cute Office, Planet Superheroes, QACCO, Belita, Game Access, Grey Meter, AHA Taxis, etc. Earlier, he spent 20 years with NIIT, where he launched and headed several new initiatives such as National Institute of Sales and LEDA. His last assignment at NIIT was creating and heading NIIT's e-business practice as senior vice president. Dr. Nath has been a consultant to the top management and several organizations such as Glaxo, Apollo Hospitals, Gillette, Nestle, Indian Oil Corporation, Bajaj Auto, etc. in the strategic use of IT for business. He has also conducted top management programs in e-governance for the Prime Minister of Namibia and Chief Minister of Delhi. Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares is his fourth book. Prior to prior to this, he has written 3 books published by McGraw-Hill. Dr. Nath has a BTech in electrical engineering and a PhD in computer science area, both from IIT Delhi. I would like to ask Dr. Nath to please address the audience. Sir, you're on mute.
I realized. Thank you. Thanks, Sahil. Okay, so can I share my screen? Yeah, I can. Mm,
So the screen is visible, sir.
yeah. Okay, great. So, um, so anyway, great to be here with you guys. Before COVID, of course, we could have met personally, but now, unfortunately, it has to be on Zoom. But anyway, so what I will do is I will split this talk into two parts. Uh, See, like Sahil mentioned, we have recently written a book, and you can see the book here, Funding Your Startup and Other Nightmares. And one of the things we've tried to do is within this book, we've tried to create a framework for successful startups. How do you, is there a way in which you can figure out whether your chances of creating a good startup are brighter or not, right? So I'll talk about that framework and then I will get into funding and how this framework is linked to funding. All right. So it'll be in two parts. I must also tell you I'm a professor, so I like to talk. So if I'm going beyond whatever time you guys have allocated, just let me know. Yeah. Okay, so this is part one. And what I will do is I will share with you, incidentally, this is a story from the book. It's a story of a very interesting startup called Squirrel. This, by the way, is not a spelling mistake. It is actually spelled like this. The company is spelled like this. So, the one question which I would ask you is, have you ever watched squirrels in action sitting in a park? You'll find that they pick up food from the ground, right? So they'll pick up nuts, they'll pick up berries, they'll pick up various kinds of food. Some of the food they will eat, but some of the food they will save. And why are they saving it? Because there will be a time when there are no nuts available, no berries available, no food available, right? So, for example, during the monsoons in India, squirrels cannot come out, they cannot look for food, so they need to save food. If you look at the Western world, during winter, everything is snowbound, right? So, you can't get nuts from the ground. So, squirrels have to save for winters. So, squirrels save food. Now, if you look at human beings, they also need to save not food, but money. Okay? But there is a fundamental problem with saving. And the fundamental problem is, and I'm sure many of you are young people, I'm sure you guys realize what the fundamental problem is. It is, there are far, far, far too many temptations. Royal Enfield has just launched a great new motorbike, and your girlfriend says, "Tere ko to leni hai, you have to buy it." You have no choice, you have to buy it, right? Or there is a new movie in town, let's assume it is not COVID time, and you have to watch it with friends and you have to watch it, in the first on the first day, first show, which is going to be expensive. So there are so many opportunities to spend money that people don't get around to saving, and that's the fundamental problem which Squirrel tried to solve. So how do they solve it? I'll just take you back to your grandmother's time, right? If you remember, in your grandmother's time, and possibly even during your mother's time, there used to be this kind of gullak, right? Or you might also call it a piggy bank. And you can notice that there is a little slot here where you can put in coins. So how would it work? So your grandmother would buy vegetables from the guy who comes to sell vegetables. So let's say she buys vegetables for 9 rupees 80 paise and she gives him a 10 rupee note. He will return 20 paise in change. What will your grandmother do? She will put that 20 paise into the gullak. And incidentally, the gullak, you can't open the gullak. If you want the money, you have to break it, right? So this money is saved. The reason why this works, and by the way, every time she spends money, the little chain that is left over goes into the gullak. Fundamental reason why this works is that this is painless, and you have to understand why it is painless. If you have spent 9 rupees 80 paise, then spending an extra 20 paise doesn't hurt you, doesn't pinch. It's not painful, right? And that 20 paise is actually saved. All right. So because you are saving very small amounts at a time, it is painless and therefore it happens. So what Squirrel did was they automated this good luck. And how did they do it? They created an app, and every time you spend money digitally, so you can spend money maybe by writing a check, or by doing online banking, net banking, or by using a credit card or Paytm or UPI or anything, right? Any wallet. Every time you spend money, you will get an SMS, right, from your bank or from Paytm saying so much has been spent. So what you do is, when you register with Squirrel as a user, you give the app access to only these SMSs, not all SMSs. Squirrel does not want your OTP. Squirrel does not want, your confidential SMSs to and from your girlfriend or boyfriend, right? So it only accesses SMSs where you are spending. Okay. So it knows how much you spent. At the end of the week, what it does is it totals up your expenses. And let us say your total expenses for the week are, suppose, 1,370. Okay. So what it does now is it rounds it up to the nearest 100 rupees. So 1,370, when you round it up, goes to 1,400. And you need 30 rupees to round it up. That 30 rupees is saved by the Squirrel app in your account. Okay. And of course, to give the saver some returns, this amount is normally put into something like a fixed deposit. They actually call it a liquid fund. So basically, it motivates the saver. Look, the amount I'm saving is actually growing, even though it is growing very, very gradually, right? So now, as you notice, it is working exactly the way the Gullak worked. Whatever amount you spent, the change that is left over, which could be 10 rupees, 20 rupees, 25 rupees, is saved. And at the end of the week. But there is one fundamental difference between the Gullak and Squirrel, which is Squirrel does it automatically. In the case of the Gullak, your grandmother had to remember to save. In this case, you don't have to remember. It's done automatically. Because right in the beginning, when you've registered with Squirrel, you told them, look, at the end of every week, please take all the small change, 20, 30, 25 rupees, and save it for me. Okay. Now, this is how Squirrel attracts customers, right? And by the way, they are focusing on young customers, college guys, young professionals, people in their first job, typically people up to the age group of about 30 to 35. That's their target segment. So now what they do is, once these savers are on board, then Squirrel starts giving them other financial products like loans, like investments in mutual funds, like insurance, and so on. All right. And there they charge. Okay. So this is how Squirrel actually makes money. Saving alone, they're not making money. But by giving them these additional products, Squirrel is making money. Okay. So that's the story of Squirrel. Now, what I want to do is, I just, of course, I've given you only a very brief overview, but for the purpose of this talk, I think that is enough. So now what I will talk about is the framework which I mentioned, which we have described in the book, which is called persistent, right? And you will notice right through this talk that each letter in this framework, right? So PERSIS, each letter stands for something that the startup has to ensure. All right. So let's start with the first letter, which is P. P stands for problem. Are you solving a problem? If you're not solving a problem, nobody is going to pay you, and therefore you will not have a successful startup. Right? Now, in this case, obviously, in the case of Squirrel, you are solving a problem, the problem of saving. Is there an earnings model? Are you going to make money? Will the customer pay you? Again, if it's a free customer, you're not going to make money, and therefore your startup cannot succeed, right? So E stands for earnings model. Your startup has to have some method of generating revenue. Size of the market. if you're creating a startup, nobody wants to create a startup which is small and stagnant. कि बॉस मेरे को 15-20 लाख से ऊपर नहीं जाना, whatever you want to do नहीं जाना है. No, you want to grow. You want a startup which possibly grows to 2 crores, 5 crores, 10 crores, 50 crores, 100 crores, etc. Right? So for you to be able to grow, the market in which you grow obviously has to be large enough. Right? Now, if you go back to Squirrel, clearly the size of the market is very large because the number of people in India, and particularly if you look at the middle class, which is about 3 to 400 million, 30 to 40 crores, it's huge. It's a huge market, and potentially everybody is a customer, right? So the size of the market is not a problem. The next question is scalability, right? So you can see I have covered PESS within the persistent framework. So now scalability, question is how scalable is Squirrel? In very simple terms, anything which is purely online, which is purely digital, is very highly scalable, right? And Squirrel is completely online, right? Where you have to set up infrastructure, where you have to set up a plant, a factory, where you have to keep adding manpower for the revenue to grow, that's not a scalable business, right? So Squirrel is a pure digital business, pure online business, and therefore it is highly scalable. Right? So that's the fourth point in persistent scalability. Can you guys hear me? Sahil?
Yes, sir. You
Yeah?
don't.
Okay, fine. Okay, next question. Risks. And that's very, very important, right? Because every business has risks, and you need to understand what the risks to your business are. And by the way, the biggest risks in any business, potential business, is what we call lack of an entry barrier. And let me explain what entry barrier means. Entry barrier means, do you have some method by which you can prevent your competitor from coming in, offering the same product as you, and potentially killing your business, right? So if you have a good entry barrier, that means your competitor will find it tougher to compete with you. No entry barrier is perfect, but obviously you have to have some entry barrier, and you should try and improve this entry barrier over time. So look at um, uh, Squirrel. So by the way, innovation is a very good method of creating an entry barrier, particularly if you have a product which for which you got a patent. Patents are a good entry barrier because it will take the other guy. I mean, if he has to copy your patent, then he has to pay you royalty, right? Or he has to develop something similar, not the same from scratch, right? So innovative solutions normally give you an entry barrier. So let's look at Squirrel. In the case of Squirrel, the entry barrier initially was low because anybody can offer the solution. Anybody can put up a website and say, boss. And incidentally, I would suggest to you guys, because many of you are potential customers for Squirrel, after this talk, just go to the site, Squirrel website, and see if you're interested and see what the kind of things they are offering. So, anybody can offer this. So initially the entry barrier is low, but over time, the trust builds up. Okay, boss, this is a good place. They handle your money well. They give you decent returns over time, and they build up a brand, right? So over time, these become some kind of entry barriers, but it is still not huge, right? So where, you do not have too much of an entry barrier, the need to scale up rapidly becomes extremely important because that becomes the entry barrier, right? So for example, Paytm actually had no real entry barrier because there are lots and lots of other wallets. But Paytm scaled up so rapidly, everybody says, ha, Paytm karo, right? That has become an entry barrier for competition. And nobody else is even close to Paytm for small payments. So entry barrier, as I said, often builds up over time. So we have covered all these, and three more things. Firstly, what do you do if the market is crowded? So for example, in the case of Squirrel, actually it's a crowded market because there are lots of sites which are offering online insurance policies, which are offering online investment in mutual funds. Most mutual funds themselves say you come to our site, right? So it's a crowded market. But what these guys have done is they have identified what we call a large enough niche, which is a subset of the market which is less crowded. Right? In this case, what is the niche? I told you their target segment is the youngsters, and youngsters normally have not yet got into the habit of saving and investing, right? So typically, if you're looking at second year, third year guys from college, or maybe people who just got their first job, or maybe 2 years into their first job, it's very unlikely that they will already be into the habit of saving and investing. And therefore, Squirrel simply focused on this niche, which itself is a large enough niche, right? Young guys, not middle-aged people, not people over 40, people typically in the age group of 18 to 30. Two more things. You may have all these things, but ultimately, what is the proof? The proof is, boss, dhanda aa raha hai ki nahi? Are you getting customers? Are they paying you? Are you actually growing month on month? Is your revenue for this month higher than the revenue for the last month? Is the revenue for the next month going to be even higher? That is what we call traction, right? And finally, one more thing, last thing, probably the most important when it comes to startups. You may have everything, very good market size. You've taken care of entry barriers. You have an earnings model. You're showing traction. But the most important thing is the team, right? And when I say team, it starts with the founders, right? You have the wrong founder, he can mess up even the best possible business plan. You have the right founder and he has a wrong business plan, chances are he will make changes to or pivot the business plan and therefore make it work, right? So team starting with the founders becomes the most important. So I think that concludes the first part of, no, hang on, I have one more slide. So I've spoken about persistent, which I showed you, right? So Persistent, right? All these are letters of the word persistent. Most important thing is the English meaning of the word persistent, right? Because, you know, when you're creating a startup or when you're building a startup, there will be lots of ups and downs. So all those of you who are already into business, you know that COVID has been a huge, huge crash, right? Many startups, unfortunately, have zero business right now, or I mean, they won't have more than 3 to 4% business, right? But you have to be persistent. Whenever you have downtimes, whenever you have things not working out, you have to keep on and on and on at it. You have to be persistent. So I would say, in addition to the framework persistent, you as a founder have to keep the English word persistent in mind, because otherwise, you know, you can't say, boss, bahut gadbad hai, I'm going to give it up and go back to a job. Then obviously things won't work. So you have to keep on and on trying. Okay, so that concludes part one. Let me now switch from here and go on to part two. And here I talk about funding and how that is linked to persistent. Yeah. Okay, so now when we talk about funding, see, there are many ways you can get funding. If you are in the right field, for example, suppose you are in the health field or the biotechnology field or the agriculture field, then there are government grants available, right? And there are several of them available. Sometimes you can get loans, but loans are not easy because they normally have a lot of conditions. For example, you have to be a profitable company. You have to have been in operation for at least 3 years and so on, right? So loans are normally not easy. What I will talk about here is neither grants nor loans. What I will talk about is equity funding, which means you are the founder, you have your company, getting some outsider to buy shares in your company. All right. So that's what I will focus on in this part. See, the first place where you will normally get funding is either yourself, your own savings, or your friends, your family, your chacha, your mama. So incidentally, I keep telling a lot of startup founders, boss, please maintain good relations with your chacha and mama because you may need money from them. Incidentally, if you're a young man planning to get married, by the way, this is a joke. If you're a young man planning to get married, your father-in-law, potential father-in-law may be willing to fund you, but please treat that as a joke. Anyway, so this is friends and family. So normally this is the first place to get funding, and very often there are terms that are thrown around. Very often some people call it seed funding. First time you're getting money. Now the important thing here, and you need to understand this, the people who are funding your business here are friends and family, which means they know you. And because they know you, hopefully they trust you. They trust you. They say, "Okay, boss, don't give me too many details of the business. I don't need to see your business plan. I don't need to see your cash flow statement. I will give you money because I know you. You're a good guy, and hopefully you will do well." All right. So that is friends and family. They do not need too many details, and they will give money at a very early stage, but it's a very small amount. Normally, friends and family together will, it may give you, let's say, between 5 and 20, 25, 30 lakhs. Unless, of course, your family happens to be Mukesh Ambani's family, then you can get, almost anything you want. So that was your first step. Now, the next step is what we call the angel investor, which I'm sure those of you who are in the incubator would be quite aware of. So these are the first external investors in your company, right? Incidentally, I must tell you, these are private limited companies. So your company has to be private limited. If you have a partnership or a proprietorship, investors will not invest till you convert that to a private limited company. Anyway, so these are the first external investors in your company, which means as compared to the friends and family, these guys don't know you, right? And therefore, they will need far more details about your startup to be convinced that, boss, this is a good company to put money into. If you go back, your friends and family did not need so many details. These guys will want to see details. Show me your revenues. Show me your customers. I want to talk to some customers. I want to meet some customers. If you have completed one financial year, show me your balance sheet and show me an audited balance sheet, right? So these are all things which the angel investor will want. And typically they will want some kind of proof. And, I keep going back to the comment on traction, right? They will want traction. They will say, boss, you may have a brilliant idea. You may have the most great qualifications under the sun, but show me some proof that the business is actually happening. You are getting customers and you're growing the business. All three are important, right? But they put in more money than family and friends, right? So typically, like I said, the friends and family round may put in anything up to 25, 30 lakhs. Angel investors put together will normally put in anywhere between about 25, 30 lakhs and roughly 3 to 3.5 crores, or about $500,000, right? So that's your angel investor. Now, fundamental question. What do angels look for? You remember part 1 where I told you to create a successful startup, you need to look at the persistent framework. If you have persistent framework, if your startup follows the persistent model, then the chances are it will do well. Of course, can't be guaranteed, but your chances of success improve, right? So that's for the startup. Now tell me, what do the angels look for? Actually, it's very simple. It is the same persistent framework. They may not use this term, but again, it's the same thing they're asking for. So you must remember, the angel investor and the founder, ultimately, they want the same thing. They want the company to do well. They want the company to compete against competition. They want the company to grow, ultimately to become profitable, to get more and more revenues. So they want the same thing, isn't it? So therefore, the angels will look for exactly the same thing, persistent. Are you solving a problem? Do you have an earnings model? Are you taking care of the risks? Is it a large enough size of the market? Do you have an innovative solution, etc., etc.? Like I said, one very, very important thing they will look at is traction. Please show me results. Show me revenue. Show me revenues growing month on month. And of course, like I said, the team is a very, very important part, which is the founder. Okay. Now I want to give you a little bit about angel networks. which again, some of you may be familiar with. See, in India, angel investors started off somewhere in the mid-90s, 1995 or so. And in the early 2000s, you had maybe about 100 angel investors. And these were typically very few rich angels. So, you had Narayan Murthy, Nandan Nilekani, Azim Premji, the founder of Wipro. Now, of course, you have Sachin Bansal of Flipkart, Binny Bansal of Flipkart. So earlier you had only a few rich angels, right? Now these rich angels, obviously, if you look at Narayan Murthy and Azim Premji and co, they have their own analysts, they have their own lawyers, they have their own accountants. So there is no problem in them evaluating, reviewing startups for possible investments, right? What has happened now is that you have the concept of angel investing has widened. And I use the term Aam Aadmi angel, right? Of course, this has nothing to do with Kejriwal's party. So Aam Aadmi angels is basically what? Not just a few rich angels, but today you probably have about 20 to 30,000 angels who are angel investors who are, they may be small businessmen, they may be professionals like chartered accountants, lawyers, they may be doctors, they may be, in my case, I'm a professor and I'm a small Aam Aadmi angel investor, right? So you've got this kind of Aam Aadmi angel, which is much larger in number. Now look at the problem. So earlier, the few rich angels had their own analysts, their own lawyers, their own accountants. The Aam Aadmi angels are not super rich, okay? And they don't have their own accountants, they don't have their lawyers and so on. So therefore, they need support, right? And which is why today you have something called an angel network. And an angel network is something which it's an organization which has multiple angels as members, right? So for example, our network, I represent Lead Angels Network. Our network has today about 200 members. Each of them is an angel investor. And if you want to raise funds, you don't have to approach each angel. You have to approach the network, right? So you approach Lead Angels Network. And similarly, you can approach other angel networks as well. So, and by the way, Ojasvi, who may be on this call, attends some of our meetings at Lead Angels, right? And
Very
sometimes
much on this call, sir.
he's there. Oh, great, Ojas. And sometimes we have shared coffee and biscuits with each other.
It's always great to share coffee with you, sir, and great learn from your wisdom, learn from all your learnings and your investment theses. I'm so glad that you're here and I have this opportunity to hear to you, sir.
Bahut badhiya. Thanks so much, Ojasvi. The moment COVID goes away, we will sit and have coffee together again.
Absolutely. Sir.
Abhi thoda time de do. I'm working on the vaccine. Thoda time de do. Okay. So, yeah. So therefore, you have angel networks, right? So if you want to raise funding after friends and family, you will normally approach an angel network, right? And they will then review your presentation. We call it a pitch, and they will shortlist those that they find interesting. Then they get you to make a presentation to their members. After which, if it is of interest, then a few members, 2 or 3 members, evaluate this in detail. Due diligence is done, accounting, legal, and finally a shareholder agreement is signed, and you get the money, right? So that's how an angel network works. So today, you don't have to say, boss, I don't have Azim Premji's phone number. You don't need it. You go to a network, right? And there are many networks around. There are, I would imagine, about 20 to 25 angel networks today. There are a few of the leading ones, but overall, you'll probably have. In fact, I think Jaipur Angel, Chandigarh Angel, Chennai Angels also exist. Right? Okay, then we come to the next stage, which is the venture capitalist, right? So far we have looked at friends and family as round one, and the second round is the venture capitalist. Now, this is the next stage. So if you want to raise more money after your angel round, you will then go to a VC. There is a fundamental difference between angels and VCs, fundamental difference, right? And the fundamental difference is the angels put in their own money, right? So if I am an angel investor, I will put in my own money. But if there is a VC, then a VC has picked up money from different people, created a fund, and that fund they will then deploy in different startups, right? They will invest in different startups. So the VC fund manager is like a mutual fund manager, right? So the angel puts in his own money, the VC fund puts in somebody else's money. That's the fundamental difference. Okay, which means, see, if you're putting in your money, right? I am putting in my own money. I can say, "Yaar, boss, ये idea बहुत बढ़िया है, मैं पैसा डाल रहा हूँ, 5 लाख डाल रहा हूँ," right? But the VC cannot say that. The VC has to take much less risk because he's dealing with somebody else's money and he has to give returns to that other somebody, right? So normally VCs will therefore put in money at a later stage when the startup is a little more evolved, little more developed. It is doing better. It has proven itself. There is far more traction and far more proof, right? So they will also want a much more detailed evaluation of the company. Okay, much more detailed than the angels would. But they will put in much more money. All right. And typically VCs can put in anywhere from, let's say, $500,000, which is 3.5 crores, to it could be 5, 10, 15, any amount, $1 million, right? By the way, just somebody will, if you can please be on mute, somebody has a discussion going on. Yeah. So, by the way, I must tell you that even if your company is based in India and the VC is based in India and you're raising only rupees, it is very fashionable to say I'm raising $500,000. Maybe raising only rupees, but उस party में 3.5 crore raise किया और $500,000 raise किया, कितना फर्क है ना? Isn't it? So much more impressive. So anyway, that is what people say. Now, next question is, what do VCs look for? We looked at angels and we saw that angels would look at the persistent framework. What do VCs look for? Actually, it's exactly the same, isn't it? Except that they will want much more traction, they will want much more proof, and they will need a lot more detailed data. So angels will look for some data, but some of the decisions they will take based on gut feel, based on hunch. But a VC will not. A VC will look at very detailed, and only then will he invest. So just to summarize the stages of funding, so I've talked about friends and family, I've talked about angel, I've talked about VCs. As I said, the amount of funding goes up from friends and family, which is typically up to 30 lakhs, to angel investors, which is 3.5 crores, to VCs, which could be 50, 100 crores, right? Level of risk goes down, and the valuation at which you're getting the money, hopefully, keeps going up as well, right? So if you were to look at this slide, that's a summary of how funding happens. These are some terms which are thrown around by the industry. So like I said, angel funding is 30, 50 lakhs to 3.5 crores. VCs, well, everybody talks about Series A, Series B, Series C, Series E, Series J. Well, these are just terms to be thrown around. So they are what I call ballpark figures. They're just terms, right? But all you have to remember is that a Series A will be done before a Series B, and a Series B will be done before a Series C. Otherwise, if you are raising 1 million and you want to call it a Series B, nobody is going to stop you, right? So these are just terms that are thrown around. Yeah. So I think just to summarize, some pluses and minuses of funding. Obviously, one big plus is funds for growth. The other big advantage you have is mentoring. If you have the right investors, because they typically have a lot more experience than many founders, and their mentoring can help. And also equally important is the network of the investors. So they can help you get clients, right? So that network will really help. Also, there are some negatives. One, of course, is dilution of shareholding, because every time you raise funds, you will give away maybe 10%, maybe 5%, maybe 15% of your equity holding. So you have to be careful. You can't suddenly say, boss, मैं 50% दे रहा हूं. No, you will then die, right? The other thing which is very important And you have to remember this pressure for results. Fortunately, if you look at VCs and angels, they realize that startups take time. They will take time to grow. They will take time to grow the revenues. They will take time to become profitable. And therefore, see, they want an exit. Ultimately, they have put in money at, let's say, 10 crore valuation, and they want to take out that money at some stage at maybe 40, 50, 60 crore valuation, right? But they realize it will take time. So angels and VCs are both normally prepared to wait. So 4 years, 5 years, 6 years is fairly common, right? Sometimes you get an exit earlier, sometimes even 2 to 3 years, but that's not very common, right? However, there are some investors, and you have to be very careful about these guys. There are some investors who give you money, and after that, within 3 months, they start piling onto you. Boss, profit kahan hai, profit kahan hai, mera paisa badhao, right? You have to avoid such investors. It's very, very important, right? And a lot of people who've come to me have said, look, I have been able to get money. I'm able to get funding from such and such guy. He runs a shop in Chavdi Bazaar and he's willing to put in 30 lakhs. I tell him, boss, usse paisa mat lo, because every 3 months, every 6 months, he's going to pile onto you. He's going to pressurize you to give him profits. And you don't want that. You don't want the investor sitting on your head. So, the ideal investor is a guy who has the same kind of long-term vision that you have, right? And that's ideal. Of course, it's not always possible, but that's ideal. So I think I will stop here, and maybe at this stage, so that's the book which I shared earlier. So maybe if you guys have questions, we can take your questions.
Yes, the one question.
Yeah. Maybe should I just stop sharing the thing, or do you want to see some slides?
No, it's fine.
Okay. So I'll just stop sharing.
So the investors which you told, VC and angel investors.
Right.
So can they, as you said, they are the part of the business which we have. So can they take up the losses as well?
No. No. See, when you're an angel investor, when you're a VC, so first of all, you remember this is a private limited company, right? A private limited company only, it is the losses in the private limited company do not mean losses for any of the individual shareholders, right? Those are independent entities. So I have put in my money, I have bought shares in the company. If the company is making a loss, it's making a loss. Yes. If the investors believe that, this loss making is temporary, and if you put in more money, hopefully things will turn around and therefore the company will become profitable, then they may be convinced to buy more shares. But they'll have to be given more share. They will not give free money. See, no investor will give free money, right? So yes, it has happened. In fact, many of the investments I have made, they have taken up another round from the same investor. And sometimes we use the term bridge. We call it a bridge round of funding. Okay, boss, you have put in 70 lakhs total so far. I need another 20 lakhs. And with those 20 lakhs, hopefully, I will be able to overcome the current crisis and maybe become profitable. So they've been able to raise 20 lakhs from the current investor. That happens. But they will not put in money simply because you're making a loss. They want something in return, right? They are financial investors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And incidentally, in case some of you want to be angel investors, you're most welcome. It's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun because I spend lots of time with youngsters, young people from whom I keep learning. Like Ojasvi, where is he gone? Yeah, he's somewhere here. So I keep learning from him.
Still here, sir, but it's mostly learning from your side, sir.
यार दोनों सीखेंगे यार और दोनों काफी पिएंगे.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I have one question.
Boss,
this is Vijay. And sir, like if like as you told the funding stages, family, friends, and angel investors and VCs.
Right.
But like if you have on the stage 2 and you have raised angel investor funding, with it, like it can be a second time also, like the angel will put, like if you're not able to get funding from VCs, will there be a subsequent round by angel as well possibility, or it is like, you know, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 only.
No.
Okay.
See, these are guidelines, right?
Okay.
So there are angel investors. If you want to raise a second round, it is possible. You will. In fact, it has happened to us. We invested in a company called AHA Taxis, right, which is into intercity taxis. And
Okay.
before that, another angel network had done angel investing there. We invested about 1 year after that. So they were both angel investments, but we invested a larger amount and at a higher valuation. So sure, it can happen. See, any combination of these is possible.
Okay, got it.
These are just guidelines. Just guidelines.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Sure, welcome. Any other questions? Sahil, do you have any? There's something in chat, I think. Or maybe you can take your questions first. Sahil, you're on mute.
Hello?
Sahil, are you married?
No, sir.
No, okay. Because married men are normally on mute. Unko unmute karna padta hai, but you're unmarried, so I'm very surprised. Anyway, bolo.
Sir, so the question says, between friends and family and angel investors, are there any other options for Indian startups to raise money, like crowdfunding, etc.?
देखो बस ऐसा है, crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is a slightly gray area. It is a slightly gray area, and it is not a very commonly used practice in India. So crowdfunding became a very popular thing in the Western world, US, Canada, Europe, and so on, where initially crowdfunding was done for all kinds of things. Somebody wanted to run a concert, and they said, "Boss, हमारे पास पैसा नहीं है, हर आदमी $1, $5, $10 दे दो." So they collected money from 10,000 people. That is crowdfunding, right? It's a gray area. SEBI has not really permitted that yet, but hopefully it will happen at some time. But I would say, see, why would you want crowdfunding? See, the problem with crowdfunding is that you have some 10,000 investors or 5,000 investors or 500 investors. It is far easier, far better to deal with a small number of investors, which typically is what the angels will be, or even VCs will be. So I don't think you should even look at crowdfunding, even if you are able to get it.
Sir, do we have any more questions? Because we only had one in the chat.
Yeah, so there is one, I think here. How can we get seed funding at early stages? Pankaj Kumar. I don't know if Pankaj is here. Yeah, he's here. So I mentioned, see, you must remember one thing. Okay, in fact, I must tell you what has happened. You know, this whole business of angel investing became very, very popular, and the Aam Aadmi angels became popular sometime in, I would say, 2013, 2014 in India, right? At that time, since it was an early thing, many angels used to invest based on excitement. कि बॉस बड़ी बढ़िया चीज है, wonderful, पैसा डालो. Unfortunately, what has happened is a lot of angels, including me, have lost a lot of money in their early investments. They've lost money. They put in money into startups, and those startups have closed down. Right? So today, angels have become a lot more careful. Now what they are saying is, was बढ़िया idea जो है ना, उसमें मैं पैसा नहीं डालूंगा. I want much more than a good idea. I want proof. And that is why, if you go back to my persistent model, what people look for is traction, right? Are you getting some traction? Are you getting a few lakhs of revenue every month? You may not be profitable right now, but can you show me the fact that maybe over 2-3 years you will become profitable, right? So today, a lot of people have come to me, unfortunately, people who need funding, but they are at the pre-revenue stage. It is very difficult to get funding from angels at that stage. Very, very difficult in today's environment. So at the pre-revenue stage, typically the best option is, like you've already done, many of you, join an incubator like Amity, where you'll get some inputs, some fund inflow, or take it from friends and family. You'll have to have significant proof of revenues, proof of traction before you get funding. So which is why, you know, when you say seed, I'm saying pre-revenue from outsiders is very, very difficult today. And by the way, which is also why angel investing as of today has become a it has become a far more profitable venture, because now angels are, putting money into startups that have proved themselves. Earlier, they were putting money into purely ideas, right? So today, I think it has become a lot more realistic. Prove that you have a business, I will put in money. Hopefully, we'll both grow together. Okay.
We have a question from,
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure. Welcome.
from one of our attendees. The question is that what kind of startups have you invested in personally, and what has your rationale been behind the investments?
Okay. So my rationale is very simple. I didn't know it then. Now I know it is persistent. So I'll tell you the kinds of startups I've invested in. I told you Squirrel I have not invested in. I invested in a company called Aha Taxis, which is into intercity one-way travel. Right. I invested in a company called Belita, which is into beauty treatment at home, branded beauty treatment at home rather than going to a salon. I invested in a company called Grey Meter, which was into skill building for young students and fresh pass outs, and then ultimately it will place them. Then I invested in a company called Quaco, which was into it was like Make My Trip, but for specific resorts, boutique resorts, right? I didn't know at that time, and I was making mistakes, and I think I've learned a lot through that. But today I would use the rationale of persistence. So I'll give you one very simple example. When I invested in Quaco, right, it was a very brilliant idea. They said, look, boutique resorts, which are specific resorts which normally don't come up on Make My Trip, or even if they do come up, they will be so low down that nobody ever discovers them. So they said, we will now promote these guys, and therefore we'll be like a Make My Trip for this niche area. Bahut badi idea, wonderful, let's do it. So I put in money. You know where they got stuck? Firstly, they had no entry barrier, because potentially anybody else could have said, boss, I can do the same thing, right? Secondly, the market size, the size of the market, remember my terms, persistent, size of the market was large, not large enough. So boutique hotels, they discovered, were not more than about 1,500, and each such resort did not have more than about 10, 15 rooms, right? Because they were small resorts. So they found at some stage they started stagnating. They couldn't grow. All right. So entry barrier was a problem, and size of the market was a problem, which is why when they tried to raise the next round of funding, they didn't get funding, because the next guy, the VC, said, boss, तुम्हारा market size छोटा है, why should I invest? You won't grow. Okay, so they couldn't grow. They had to close down. Right. So I would say in today's environment, if somebody does not satisfy the persistent kind of framework, definitely I would not invest. So today, for example, I have invested very recently in 2 companies in the online education space. Now that's a huge booming market, very scalable because it is online, and a very, very huge market. And they have both operated in niche areas. So one is operating in the extracurricular field, things like coding, things like robotics, things like dance and drama and so on, which there is not too much competition. And one guy is talking about young kids. The company is called Oki Poki, by the way. Young kids who do not have an English background in the family but want to learn spoken English, right? So that is also growing dramatically, right? So today I would look at persistent, but in the past I have lost money and I have not followed the persistent formula. If you guys are startup founders or investors, hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and follow this formula. Incidentally, it's not a formula, it's not a guarantee, but it's a guideline to hopefully improving your chances.
So the next question is from Varsha. How do you expect your non-revenue making startup expect a higher valuation against revenue making opportunity with slower valuation? How do you convince investors in such a case?
Okay, is this person on the call? Can she explain a couple of things? Are you there?
No, this
She's
is
not there.
the while registering this question was there.
Okay. So see, first of all, non-revenue startups find it difficult to get funding. That is true. However, I must tell you, if you look at Squirrel, when they got funding, they got funding at a very good valuation, and I'll explain why. Squirrel has two huge advantages. What they said was, right now we will not get revenue. We will only get people who are saving. We'll get them to save, and over time we will offer them products for which we will charge, and therefore we'll start making money. But right now we are not making money. One huge advantage they had, again I'll go back to my persistent model, is the team, right? Huge advantage was that there are three founders. All three were very senior guys from the banking industry. They had contacts, they understood finances, they understood, this whole financial industry. And in fact, the CEO, his name is Samant Sikka. He was a senior vice president at Axis Bank before he left. Okay. Number one. Number two, so that is one part. Number two, these guys between them put in 3 crores. Okay. So from your own sources, if you put in 3 crores and you're very senior guys with a lot of experience, look at the level of confidence that the investor gets. Okay, boss, these are experienced guys. They know the market. They've studied the market. They have been advising customers to, save money and invest money, etc., etc. And they put in their own 3 crores. That is the reason why Squirrel actually got a very, very good valuation, and they got investment even before they had got revenue. So normally you will need a decent amount of revenue before you get investments, but there are exceptions, and Squirrel is one of them.
Sir, I think in the interest of time, we'll only take one more question. So
Okay, sure.
From Ajinkya Upadhyay, can a startup offer IPO at its early stage?
Why do you want to? So by the way, it is allowed now. SEBI has allowed you to, but the problem is, see, IPO, doing an IPO is not easy. Doing an IPO is an expensive, time-consuming business, right? And you need to be able to convince so many people that, look, put in 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees each in my company, right? It's not easy. So IPO is not the right way to go. You can, SEBI has allowed it now. I think it's called an OTC exchange, if I remember right. But it is far better to either go in for friends and family or go to angels, because you need to raise money maybe from 10 to 15 angels, and that entire thing, you don't have to convince each angel separately. You just go to the angel network. They will help you in convincing that group of angels. So it's a far, far better option. So I would say IPO is possible, but it's a very, very theoretical option. I wouldn't recommend it.
Sir, one final question from Pramod. When is it reasonable for investors to start expecting returns, or for the startup to start thinking about giving their investor an exit?
Exits are normally expected between about 4 to 5 years, normally, right? However, it can change dramatically. So for example, if you look at Squirrel, they have just started making money after 3 years. Making money meaning getting revenues. So I don't expect them to give their VCs an exit before about 6 years. I don't expect that, right? So generally 4 to 5, but many startups are never able to give an exit because they have either died or, see, to get an exit, you have to have some other investor who comes in, the next stage investor, who comes in and says, boss, I will buy the earlier guy's shares at a higher valuation. That's a good exit, right? Many startups are not able to get the next stage investor for whatever reason. They haven't grown enough, or they have not shown a path to profitability, or whatever. So many cases exits do not happen, but even where they do happen, expectation is normally about 4 to 5 years, generally.
So one last question, that when an investor is, in evaluating a startup, so the weightage, is it more on the founder or the innovation or the idea or the solution the startup is providing?
I would say everything is important, but I would put it like this. If it's great innovation, brilliant idea, but the founder is poor, the investor will not invest, right? If it's an idea which or it's a product which may need to be changed, but the founder is good, the investor is likely to invest. He could invest. Okay. I'll give you one simple example. I'll just take a few minutes. Somewhere in the year, sorry, somebody had a question? No. So about 5-6 years ago, one very interesting startup had approached us for funding. And this startup had, they had developed something that they called a waterless urinal. All right. Now they made this presentation to us, and these were some good engineering students, along with one professor of theirs. So this presentation was made to us approximately 2 months after Prime Minister Modi's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. You remember he had spoken from the India Gate, from India Gate during the Independence Day speech, and he talked about building toilets, right?
Yes,
Swachh
sir.
Bharat Abhiyan. I think it was 2014 or 2015. I forget which year it was. But this was 2 months after that Swachh Bharat. Suddenly, you can imagine what happened to us investors. We said, boss, ye to gold mine hai. Absolute gold mine. You know why? Because the Prime Minister has said we need to build 2 crores toilets. Pani kahan hai? There is no water. Now, these guys have come up with a solution where they say we have a low-cost solution for providing waterless urinals. So you don't need money. You can build 2 crore toilets. There's no problem. So as investors in this business concept, right, we were delighted and we saw the product. Our guys evaluated it. We had engineers on the team and we said, boss, bahut badhiya, wonderful. So then we asked the founders, look, how will you sell this? How will you get business out of it? They said, we'll appoint distributors. We said, nah, theek hai, bahut badhiya. That's the way to go. Because typically this will be sold through hardware shops, you know, shops, hardware and sanitary shops. Right? So we said, okay. So we gave them 1 month, and in those, I think 2 months. In those 2 months, we did all our research, evaluated the company solidly. And finally, at the end of 2 months, everybody said, boss, bahut badhiya, isme paisa dalna hi hai. And then these guys came back and we met them and we had some last minute clarifications, but we had decided paisa dalna hai. So we asked them, and these guys, these young engineers were looking very happy, very excited. So we said, kya hua? Oh, sir, you know what we are doing now? We said, what? Sir, we are now working on a female version of the same thing. So we said, hang on. What about the male version? वो जो अभी बनाया था? हाँ, sir, वो है. So we said, you had said you'd appoint distributors. Appoint kiya? Nahi, sir, but once the female version comes out, we will appoint distributors. What do you think we guys did as investors?
Of the investment.
Namaste ji. Namaste ji. Nice meeting you. Coffee pio aur jao. So brilliant idea, brilliant business, very good product, huge market. You know, the persistent model, everything was satisfied except the team. The team was a pure tech team. They had zero business sense. We said, if you can get in one co-founder who understands business, then we will consider it. Otherwise, no, we are not investing. Right? So I would say everything is important, but above all, team and the founder becomes the most important.
So I think it's time for us to conclude the session. I would like to thank Dr. Dhruv on behalf of our president, Honorable Dr. Aseem Chauhan, sir, our CEO, Mr. Rajaswi Babbar, sir, and our team across various centers in India and abroad. And also, thank you, sir, for sparing time out of your busy schedule to share reviews on startup funding and how a founder can, look at those small things and raise funds for the startup. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Sahil, Ojasvi, Yamini, everybody else. And even more, thanks for the tea and snacks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.